manipulation. Now that the feather has been flattened, rather than stripping off these small, short fibers, I suggest trimming them because the stubble will allow the thread to have material into which it can bite, if you will. Remember when we tied off the silk in the last step, we had 5 wraps, and we're going to leave those in place in this particular circumstance because we want to have a thread base. We're going to wrap back to the point that the silk ends. You might notice that this feather cocks up quite a bit as we have tied it in, partly because there's a shoulder here where the silk tag drops down. There are 2 ways to approach that problem. One is to put an additional thread layer such that the thread is brought up to the level of the tying of the tag. Another technique, and this may be useful whether it cocks up or not, some tyers like the tail to lie more flat, allowing for a sleeker wing. You can take your nail and do what is a procedure called nicking. Basically, it's putting a crimp on the back side of the curve of the fly so that it lies straighter and more flat once it's tied in. Again, touching turns. We want the hook, we want the fly, or we want the feather to lie in the plane created by the hook shank and the bend of the hook, such that when you look down on it, everything is in alignment. The feather can be adjusted by gently pulling under the thread wraps so that it is shorter in this area here. So if we wanted to use a shorter feather, that's the way we would use a shorter feather with the fibers near the base left intact. Similarly, if we want to use the larger feather, rather than making any cuts or crimps, we simply put a couple of soft loops, allowing the feather to be longer, and then pulling it into position, and then putting a total of 5 firm wraps. Notice that there may be 1 or 2 fibers that have gone astray. Those can simply be cut and will not show in the final process. At this point, once the feather for the tail has been placed in proper position, it is very reasonable to take a drop of very fine, clear head cement and apply it to those thread wraps. Once that has been secured, it's reasonable to come in with the scissors and cut off the butt of this feather right against the thread wraps. And that's how you apply a golden pheasant crest feather for a tail on a salmon fly. The next step that we'll talk about, or technique, is applying a Herl Butt to a classic salmon fly. There are times when Herl is used at the butt of the fly to bury the tie-off spot of the tail and tag. At other times it's referred to as a joint when it becomes the connection between 2 different body parts. There's lots of ostrich herl on the market.